Hello, folks. Hello, men. How y'all doing this morning? Good. All these guys know me, but I want to welcome our audience to the first, the Entrust Network Podcast. I have with us today as our guest, Mr. Ricky Dickson, who is the former president and CEO of Bluebell Ice Cream. Now, if you guys have not heard about Bluebell, then you haven't heard about ice cream, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I want to tell you about the Entrust Network for a few seconds. The Entrust Network, I'm the founder. We just started this, me and God, February 1st of 2025, so welcome. You hear more about that later. So in the meantime, I thought about doing this for a while, and I came across a verse. Of course, I always come across a verse, right? Acts 17:26 says, "And he made one from one blood, every nation on the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation." Now this plays into Ricky, because in this scripture, it sets out the sovereignty of God, number one. Two, he made everybody from Adam. So we have a guy here from Nigeria, we got a here from Indonesia, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And we got one from India, we got one from Nigeria, and other guys in America, and also Argentina. So we're just a hodgepodge of international people, businessmen. And so we all came from one person. And he has determined your appointed times, which is your birth and your death. So you've been appointed to come here at this time, providentially, as I sort of look at it, and want to have fun with it. But the other thing, the boundaries of your habitation. And do you know the final boundary of your habitation, where you're going to live and where you're going to work? Is it solely Dallas, Texas, or is it going to be Cameroon, or is it going to be India, or is it going to be where you're living right now? You want to move out of the house? Well, with Ricky Dickson, he was going to McMurray College.
Yes.
And little did he realize he was going to end up in Baylor, and little did he realize, and it's in his book, which, by the way, he wrote this book called One Scoop at a Time, and it's from fear to faith. It's all stories about that, so we're going to talk about that. So little did he realize the boundaries that he ended up being in, because he wrote a paper. So I want you to begin by telling him a little about you and how you wrote this paper as a junior or senior at Baylor University, and start your story that way.
All right. Well, first, thank you again for being here. What a morning. What a great way to start the day. And yes, my journey, I will say, started in high school by dating a certain girl that I really did think was going to be the Mrs. Dixon. She didn't think that, I guess, down the road, as we will find out. But she was a year behind me in high school. And so I ran track at the time. I thought, well, I'm going to go to this little college in Abilene where my sister was attending. And I could compete at that level. I wasn't fast enough for the Southwest Conference, which was a conference, y'all are way too young. So you may have heard about it, but I'm sure we're not around when that was in play. But so I went to McMurray my freshman year, but I really chased her to Baylor. It was her passion to go to Baylor. And I tell people it was my passion to want to be with her. We get to Baylor, and the very first week we're there, we break up. So that was one of those God things, and I really do believe, and you said it beautifully at the time in high school, not really understanding or knowing what God had in store for me. I knew he had a plan for me, but I just didn't know what that was. So to go to McMurray for a year and then to transfer over to Baylor was just a simple thing. But it was at Baylor that I had a consumer relation class that was challenged all the students to be able to find a company and study the company for the entire semester, and write a report on how this company relates to the consumer. And I didn't have a clue. I was in Waco. I'm still, teenager. Went back to the apartment, called my dad, and my dad was actually reading an article out of a magazine on that little ice cream company down in Brenham, Texas. And he said, you ought to go down there and see if you could interview with them and get your information. And so it's really that trip down to Brenham that opened my eyes. I was a marketing journalism major, really thinking about either public relations or advertising. But when it came time to make a decision to start doing interviewing for a career, I thought, I'm going to go back to that little creamery and just see. I had no idea what I'd be interviewing for. You know, people are saying, well, do you get your own truck? Do you drive through the neighborhoods? Do you get to pick your music? I'm thinking, I think it's a little bigger than that, but it was a true God thing. He was opening and shutting doors. I believe with all my heart that it was by me following, at the time, a girlfriend, but really staging myself in the next position. And that's the reason the title is One Scoop at a Time, or One Step at a Time. And God getting me to Baylor in order to find that little company. And then, so graduation comes, I fill out the application, I go back and I apply for a job, and I actually started and lived about maybe 2 miles from here, my very first job back in January of 1981.
So you actually passed the interview and got a job, your first job, right?
Still surprised at that.
Was that an hourly job or a salary job?
That was salary.
Salary.
Yes, $1,000 a month. And I was living large. I had, and up until then, I mowed yards and I sold Cokes at San Antonio Hemisphere Arena where the Spurs played. And that gave me exercise up and down the bleachers and enough money. I told my kids, if you had a good night at the Spurs, you made $10. And $10 would get you a large pizza and 2 movie tickets for the weekend. So you'd had enough to go on a date. So if they had 2 home games in a week, man, you were living large. You could really kick it up a notch.
So I won't go back to my history on my first construction job, but I mean, it was, $2.87 an hour.
Yeah.
Hourly worker, way back when, back in 2006. Anyway, so it's interesting. So in the boundaries of his habitation, so you got the job, and how long have you been with Bluebell Creameries?
I worked 43 plus years before I
43 years.
retired.
Now, tell us a little bit about the history, because I think they're about 118 years old.
That's right.
The Cruz family started this deal. So give us the history about Bluebell Creamery, the butter, then the Bluebell,
Sure.
then the transition.
Well, actually started in 1907 as a butter company. We were the Brenham Creamery company. In 1919, the company was not doing very good, and so they reached out to a gentleman by the name of E.F. Cruzy. He had a decision whether to come to the creamery and work or work as the superintendent of the Burton school system. And he chose, fortunately, the creamery. And so from 1919 to 1951, he ran the company, and then he passed away, and his 2 young sons, one was 23, one was 21, they took the company over. And Ed Cruzy was the mastermind as far as the business side of things, and Howard Cruzy was the mastermind on all the flavors that you still enjoy today. He's the one that created homemade vanilla and a lot of the other pralines and cream, and I can sit and talk about all the different flavors, but it was more than just creating the flavors. It was their philosophy that was so gravitating to. They had a tremendous work ethic, work hard, work smart, give it all you can every day that you come in. And it was like, let's do this. Let's jump on board, grab me a dipper, and let's start eating. Something like that.
So tell us a little bit of how you sort of progress through Bluebell and the moves you made.
Okay, well, I'll make this fast. I started right here in Dallas. 1960, we went into Houston with our ice cream. We quit making butter in 1958. So we had a little bit of time. Okay, we're going to do strictly ice cream. From 60 to 64, we were only in that Houston, Brenham, which is between Houston and Austin, if you're unfamiliar. In 1964, we went into Austin. So we were really going back both directions from the creamery. But we didn't go into Dallas until 1978. And so you have this big gap in between. But the philosophy was, let's go, let's sell, let's make sure that the ice cream that we're producing is consistent day in and day out, and make sure that we can actually handle the different markets before we bite off more than we can chew. And so it wasn't how fast and how big and how quick we can grow. It's as we grow, let's do it the right way. I have found through doing some of these interviews a phrase that I was just taught early on that's really not that popular, I guess, now. But the philosophy was, it's a cinch by the inch, hard by the yard. Cents by the inch. So let's grow. Grow this much, that's great. You don't want to grow too far, but you want to make sure you're growing and get in that sweet spot. And so in 78, we came to Dallas. I graduated in December of 80. 2 weeks later, I'm here, but things are happening in Dallas. I mean, it was one of those things when it's when you can't have something that you want it. And so for a long time, people were hearing about Bluebell ice cream in Dallas, but you had to go to Houston or Austin to get it. So now that we were in Dallas, the ripple effect is what we call, the word was getting out and rippling out. So I jumped on board. I mean, it was an exciting time. I was fortunate. I was single. We worked long hours, but it didn't matter. There wasn't anything or anybody to go home to. And so we just really enjoyed.
So what was your next promotion?
Okay, I'm sorry. I gave you a long answer to that.
Yeah.
Went from Dallas to Fort Worth, moved into a position called assistant branch manager. There are different branch locations. Today we call it sales manager. From there in 1984, they asked me to run our branch in San Antonio. So I went back to my home, where I originally came from, 2 miles from where I grew up. Mom and dad and sister and brothers and all that. And 10th largest city, and I'm living the dream. I'm 24. I didn't want to tell them, but what are y'all thinking? I'm young, I'm green, but hey, let's sell ice cream. So from 1984 to 1989, I was in San Antonio, and then they asked me to move to Oklahoma. And we can get into that. That's a real pivotal time in my career.
Well, was this the first time you went from fear to faith?
Yes, I would say it's probably...
What was the issue? What was the issue?
The first was...
Fear. I want to know the first fear.
The first fear was probably going to Oklahoma, only because I didn't know anyone. I was at a very comfortable place. Again, with all my family there, it was just a sweet spot, not to make it a pun, but when asked, this new market was going to be potentially a new region. We're leaving Texas for the first time as a company. We're going across state lines. And so that was exciting, but obviously you're thinking, wow. And I never will forget, they said, we want you because we'll trust it. You'll call us if you have questions. We don't want you to just go up there and do your own thing and kind of go rogue on us. So when I got up there, I went with good intentions, but at the same time, I kept thinking about this new title, this new promotion, this new growth. And really, this period of days to weeks to months, and then what turned into years, it got real quiet. I'm thinking, I thought we were up here getting ready to do this region, and I finally got the phone call. We had a big meeting planned. All the managers were coming in. They said, we want to talk to you after dinner. And so I'm pumped. In fact, I really do remember not even eating much because I'm thinking, this is finally, the anticipation. But when I walked into the room, I could tell immediately that there was no confetti, there was no balloons. It was really more of a real quiet mood. And so I sat down and for about 45 minutes, we went line by line, handwritten, on one of those yellow pad, single-spaced. These are the things that we're not seeing that we saw in you. These are the things that you need to be doing that you're not doing. And you talk about the wind going out or the air going out of the room. There's no question it caught me off guard. Went back to the hotel room. I think back, I didn't argue, which was good.
Well, did they fire you?
No, okay. They just said these are the things that
you need to work on.
Yeah, these are the things.
It got a lot of fear inside you.
A lot of fears inside me.
So what'd you do then?
And I would say not only fear, but anger. I mean, there's a lot of emotions thinking, wait a minute, you brought me up here, I left everything back in San Antonio, and yet what I recognized was they didn't fire me, and that they were pointing out things that they believed in me. And it almost changed my mindset, but I just remember praying, God, I thought you brought me here. I thought this whole was your plan. And
how old were you at this time?
At that time, that's a good question. I was probably just right at 30 years old, 31 years old.
So it's a sort of a mid-course correction. And we all have bosses or people interact that says, you're doing this wrong. You could do your banking better, do the investment better. Or how do you become a better husband? And it's really gut-wrenching time. You go, how do you change it? So how did your faith interact with that when you had this long list, and what'd you do specifically?
Well, on the end of the bed in the hotel room, I just remember praying out, God, again, I don't understand this. This is confusing to me. And in the midst of that prayer, not necessarily audibly, but within me, I heard it clear as day as I didn't ask you to come up for your promotion. I asked you to come up here for my purpose. And I never will forget that feeling like, you have a purpose for me. I'm caught up in a title. You're caught up, not caught up. You have a plan for me, and yet I'm messing it up by putting a new business card or new label on the desk, when that's not what you called me here to do. And so really it was that no question, I'd made a decision. I could have left. I could have walk out I'm going to go find another company. They led me to believe, and instead I did the opposite. They took the time to sit me down to go through this line by line. I'm going to All
right, so let me ask you this. You said you get about his purpose. So what, at that point in time at 30, what was his purpose for you being up there in Oklahoma? What was it?
His purpose was getting away from self and to focus on the job at hand, whatever that job would be.
So that you did your ego a little bit of damage, huh? It needed that.
Absolutely.
You're a cocky 30-year-old.
Well, yeah, and you don't realize it. I had left center, like driving a car, and I had left center and thinking that I was doing everything I was doing before. But when I saw on paper and listened to what they had to say, I had left center. And so it was time to have a unplug, count 30 seconds, and plug back in.
So you did this. So you made a volition, made up your will, made up your mind to make this change, and you went through that list and made changes. So did you ever get that promotion?
Within about 5 to 6 years, I found myself actually running our production facility in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, about the time they promoted somebody into that position of the new regional manager.
Oh, ahead of you.
And I was not even considered at that point because I had shifted from sales into production.
Well, how'd that make you feel?
It didn't bother me a bit. I mean, and when I say that, I called on Walmart, was my one account, but then I ran the production facility. Now, when I say it didn't bother me a bit, it was like, wow, here I thought this is why I moved up here, and I'm not even on that. I'm not even on the sheet music. But I'm over here doing what I truly believe was God's plan for me to do. And I didn't understand that at the time either, but I will say 20 years later, when it came time to name a new president, and they turned to me and said, we want to put you in this position.
Hang on, just
I know, I jumped ahead.
You jumped ahead of
that.
So anyway, all right. So you become a production manager. Then did you go back down to Brenham or San Antonio or Dallas after this when you became production manager?
I stayed and remained what's called general manager of the Broken Arrow facility for 6 years, and then they asked me to move to Brenham as the general sales manager. Okay. So they actually asked me to move back over.
Well, let me ask you this. If you remember, how many gallons of ice cream did you produce out of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma?
Oh, I don't. I will tell you that on any given day on a line, a production line, we make about 25,000 half gallons. And so we ran somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 lines per day, every day. So when you start
6 to 8 lines per day?
Per day, every day.
And 25,000 per day.
Per day.
So what's the math in that? 200,000 half gallons?
Quite a few half gallons. And some of that's pints, and we did make those little cups. But for the most part, that puts it in perspective of
All right, gotcha. So you're production manager, you're going back down to Brenham, a new deal, right?
Yes.
All right. So what kind of fear to faith occurred there in Brenham as you were the sales guy? What was the name?
It was called General Sales Manager, which was directly below the Vice President of Sales and Marketing. So you're kind of the right hand of the Vice President of Sales and Marketing, overseeing the entire sales.
Okay, what was the challenge there?
Well, on one hand, it was exciting because I call it, I was getting back on my bike. You don't ride a bike in a while, but when you get back on, you go, I remember this. This is great. So that part was exciting. But on the same time, the fair part is now you're overseeing markets that you've never been to. You're not just the Walmart account, which was fun in itself, but we were spreading out as a company and just what steps to take and how fast to take them. Mm-hmm. And what methods to go. So well,
let me ask you this. You may not want to answer this, but since you sell to Walmart, how much do you sell them a half gallon for?
Same price as I sell it to the guy down the street. We had one program, and you could have it, or if you didn't, and there's certain accounts that today that want a better deal than anybody, and we have a program, and you can choose that program, or you choose not to carry Bluebell ice cream.
All right, let me ask you this. This a little personal, okay? My favorite is cookies and cream. Really, I love that. Now, I heard you had to actually buy all those cookies from Nabisco, right? Mm-hmm. They make that?
I think that's correct.
And they don't cut you any slack in that, but I don't know if it's a company secret or not. But how do you buy them from Nabisco. How's that working?
Well, we did buy them from Nabisco. When we first started making cookies and cream, we were actually the first to package it in a container to take home. And so when we purchased those cookies, they were in, the big boxes, but they're in the individual packages. So we had two ladies stand all day and open the package and dump those cookies. Now,
literally how I imagine it.
Yeah.
And they still do it today.
No, not today. It's different today.
Oh, different today.
Nabisco at the time saw the success of the product, and so they we're not going into too much of the weeds.
No, we don't want to do that.
They wanted.
All right, so now you're the vice president of sales, right?
Well, general sales manager.
General sales manager. So what was the next Fear to Faith promotion? What did you have to face there? New sales territory and stuff like that?
The next one was in 2010, where I became the vice president of sales and marketing. But I'll be really honest, I was absolutely loving it. I think I shared that I was thinking about public relations and advertising, and part of that position was being behind the scenes on creating commercials, creating carton design, and when I say creating, just overseeing. We had a tremendous team that did all that. But working in that arena, so a fear from the standpoint that, wow, I never thought I'd be in this room or I'd be behind this desk.
Well, let me ask you this: are you the one responsible for the cookies and cream from the land of contented cows? You remember that commercial?
I do.
I mean, if you guys may have not seen that was
the reason Bluebell ice cream tastes so great is because the cows think Brenham is heaven. That was our whole commercial, with nothing but cows out in the middle of the field. The cheapest one we ever made because we didn't have to pay them. We just let them eat in the field. And I like to say they even wore the right jersey, but I don't think that's the same cow. But anyway, sorry. Another joke in there.
You always had the same color cow. It was a brown one.
It was a brown one.
Yeah, I remember that. All right, so give me a Fear to Faith as the vice president of sales. I mean, give me some meat and potatoes.
Obviously, the biggest of all, and we've had probably the first was in that position was our Listeria issue that took place in 2015. I was vice president of sales.
You heard of Listeria stuff and the problem they had. Okay.
And so when that hit in the beginning of 2015, obviously it was ice cream is supposed to be a very safe product. It's a very low risk. You take a product and you pasteurize it, and then you put it in about a -20 environment. You shouldn't have that issue. And so in the ice cream industry, that's just a very low risk. And yet at the same time, we had it. And so it was devastating, and our hearts broke for those that were affected by it. But it drove us to our knees without any question. And we said, we're gonna do it right. We could have put a Band-Aid on it by testing just the final product, and we decided, no, we're gonna do it the right way to get ahead of it. So we literally shut down from April 21st of 2015 to September 1st, took all the equipment out of the rooms, tore up the floor, tore down the walls, ceilings, redid air conditioning, and then rebuilt everything using the aids of microbiologists and the FDA and the state. We called in as much reinforcement from the outside. We even went to other food industries. And what do y'all do? Because there's a lot of, obviously, you want to get way ahead of it, and we wanted help from experts. And so today I couldn't be more proud of where we're at, but obviously that was a lot of fear. Are we going to make it? 3,500 employees that are.
So how many months or years were you shut down from production?
Oh, we were shut down again from April to September for that, and we threw away about 8 million gallons of ice cream. Now, put that in perspective, that's 16 million half gallons of ice cream. So one of those little tubs you see on this, 16 million of those made it to the landfill. And probably most of it was in great shape, but we didn't want to take the chance. So we literally started over. So that was, there's some fear in there.
So how'd you pray during that time? And you had maybe people suing you, got all maybe legal problems, production problems. Everybody's wondering if the company's going to still exist. How did you pray at the time from fear to faith in this deal?
Similar to the way I pray today. God, I'm a sinner. I know that there are things that I've done, whether consciously or not consciously, but I want to serve you in whatever capacity you allow that. And this was a big deal. And we didn't understand a lot of it until we dove into it. But God, help us navigate the steps. How do we get from where we're at to where we need to be? Lead us, guide us, open our eyes, lay on our heart the things that we needed to do.
Now, you were praying that way. Now, The Cruises, were they praying with you, or was it just you?
Well, I mean, obviously, I could say it was just me. We did pray as a company. We did pray as there were meetings that we would, getting ready to take some of these phone calls. We did go to prayer. The Cruises are, I would say, more private in their faith, but yet they lived it. It's a German Lutheran community. And so, again, the things that I saw in the Cruises and really with Bluebell was the ethics of Christian faith, but yet it can be the ethics, even if you don't put the two together, of just doing the right thing. And that's what our heart and soul was. Let's get to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
So let's go to this point that you're vice president of sales. Cruises are maybe going to retire, something like that. So you have this board meeting. I want to set this up. We got a few minutes. We're going to transition here. So you have this big board meeting, and you're the senior vice president of sales?
Vice president of sales.
All right, of the company. So tell us about this board meeting you went into, because it's been a family-run company for at least 110, 15 years at this time.
Yeah, we're right at 100. He took over in 1919, so we're now at 2017.
Okay, all right.
So we're right on the third generation.
So tell me about the meeting.
Well, at that point, it had been 2 years since we had identified the Listeria, and we had gone back into market. We were growing through our process slowly back to market. We weren't in all markets at that time, but we were taking it, again, one step at a time, or one scoop at a time, however you want to tie that in. But in the meeting at that time, Paul Cruzy, who was president and CEO, made the decision and announced that he would be retiring. And so in that course of the board meeting, I'm on one end of the room, he's on the other end of the boardroom table, and the whole board kind of turns and says, well, we'd like to nominate you as president. And
what did you feel at that moment?
Fear?
Yeah. Were you shocked?
Yeah, I was definitely shocked. For the very reason, being that the Cruzy's had running for so long.
And you're the first outsider to come in.
Yes. Since, I guess, 1919 before EF.
So they must trust you.
I definitely was humbled beyond words. There's no question. I believed in my heart, if this is what God you want me to do. So
you became president and CEO, right?
That's right.
So what screw up did occur that you did that since then? No. You catch what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I do.
Okay.
I think that really was the work ethic and everything, that the people that have been around me and the training. It's not that I don't speak my mind, and I can tell you some great discussions with them when your heart says one thing, but at the same time, and again, I go back to the background that I had, both sales and then in production, running the production facility, put me in a unique spot because I had seen both sides of our operation, and so to step in, I could talk to production and understand if they're talking about whatever the difficulty of, hey, we're running issues with whatever.
Well, let me ask you this. How long were you president and CEO of Bluebell Creameries?
A little over 7 years.
So why did you step down? We got about a minute for you to answer. So you're 66 at this time, right now.
Well, this Sunday.
This Sunday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And so you decided to step down. So what transitioned you to say, it's time for me to step down? And
as we entered the last market, and now we're back to market, we pretty much have our complete ice cream line back in the market. We've got our pints, we've got take-home snacks. Yeah. It was just a real turning point as I looked forward. The next phase really needed the commitment from at least, I would say, 5, if not 10 years. And also the board makeup and direction of the company and all those factors. You want to be able to come every morning and give it everything plus. And I also prayed, God, look, you put me here in this place, in this position, and I don't want to step out of it if this is just because I can. If this is the time, then open my heart to that. But if it's not the time, then let's stay locked in. And
so what did he tell you?
It took about 2.5 years to make the decision to who they replaced me with. So I took it. It was a slow burn, kind of, preparing my heart for what's next. The book came out of nowhere. I felt like I still have, and I still believe I have gas in the tank. I want to be able to do things today and be mindful of what God now has in store for me. I always thought the one scoop at a time was getting me to Bluebell, but I really have come to the belief that everything even consider, I mean, even looking at Bluebell is positioning for this moment in time. And because I wouldn't be here if I wasn't CEO and president of Bluebell.
Right. So Dom had a good scripture you shared with me this morning. You said, all things.
Yep, all things work to the good of those who are called according to his purpose.
Right. So your purpose, right, was completed at Bluebell, and he's written this book. And so I want to transition talking to our men. So I guess Joshua has the first microphone. I don't know who has it in there. Chase will turn it on. But I've set this up for you. I've given your book to all these men. They've read it, and they have questions from different chapters. And we're sort of just going to popcorn some fast questions to you, okay? I don't want a 7-minute answer for a 5-second question, okay?
You've gotten to know me pretty well, haven't you, Stan? I'm a storyteller, so it's hard to do that enough.
All right, Ricky, that's enough. We're going to the first question.
Absolutely.
Ricky, thank you again for being here. My name is Joshua Graziani. I've been in the financial services industry for about 20 years. And like you, when I was 30 years old, I moved from California to Texas. And so I know I can relate. But that's not what my question's about.
Hold on. What's your favorite ice cream?
Oh, my favorite ice cream would be pistachio.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
pistachio.
Pistachio almond.
Bluebell pistachio.
Yeah, Bluebell pistachio.
Good.
Yeah.
You're a weird guy, but we still love you. So what's your question?
So in the monster slide, I can relate a lot because I hate roller coasters and things of that nature. But you described the monster slide in a way where it was temporary fear. You knew it was going to end soon, yet it felt like that 2-minute ride was probably like 2 weeks. But I think that I feel like a lot of other men that I talk to tend to operate in that fear as if it's not going to end. And so looking back, I mean, you went through hurricanes, you've gone through moves, relocating, a lot of fearful things. What would you say looking back now to people that might be living in fear, and how to get out of that fear and get back to what you said, centered, to make just better, sound, righteous decisions instead of making fearful decisions?
It's a great question, and I will answer very quickly at the same time. But I think that the quicker you can get to that peace that passes all understanding place. I use Mark 4 a lot about the disciples on the boat, and the waves are coming in, and Jesus is asleep, and they go wake him up, and he does one of those mic drops, and he's yes, he is Jesus, but at the same time, he sleeps. Who sleeps on a boat in general, much less during a storm? And so when I get to a place when I can see this is an issue, and I love what you said. Sometimes you don't know when the end of the slide is. You don't know, is this going to be prolonged or if it's going to be short-lived. But to get to the place that, look, I heard the other day, and I love this phrase, let go, let's go. And I thought, man, that's my next book. Let go. Give it to God, because when you can see him at work, I call it, another thing is my second wind in track. When you get to a point where all of a sudden you got that second wind, it's because now God has it. And when you get to that point, no matter what happens, he's in control. That peace that passes all understanding comes. And most of the time for me, looking back through all those struggles, I go, wow, I didn't see this, but you were shaping, molding, making all the way to the presidency when I'm thinking, what's going on? So anyway, great question.
Hey, Ricky, thanks so much for being here. My name's Whitten Owen. Some of my favorite flavors, mint chocolate chip, for sure. My question, in reading chapter 6, you're talking about you talk a lot about choices in the book and kind of making decisions. And at one point you talk about the importance of really dying to yourself daily. And obviously, as you know, in the position that you're in, you're making lots of big decisions, probably many a day, that are expensive and, have a lot of impact on people. So can you kind of tell me, what does it look like kind of in your daily life as you die to those types of things? Like, what does that look like in your daily life, in relationship with God?
Again, thank you for the question. That's a great question. And I think that when you realize the answer now in that position of being president is the final decision. It was really great as vice president. I can tell and say whatever, and here's my recommendation, but good luck. And we'll all watch and see how your decision ends up. But when you're in that final decision, you really do look at it differently. You're looking at the fact that there's 3,500 employees. You're looking at all the consumers that are out there. But you surround yourself the best you can with good people and getting great advice. But you also start every day, and this is what every day, starting on my knees, God, lead me through, discern, help me in that navigational path to get where I need to get for the good of the company, to the good of the consumer, and get self out. I mean, there are times that, this will make me look good, but it may not be the right thing. And you want to do the right thing. And so if you can remove yourself, it's a servant leadership type of approach. I use Romans 12 a lot as, when you can die to self and offer yourself up and then allow God to transform your mind. And it's a daily process. And you do have those battles, but praying that you stay humble, but do it with confidence and make the best decisions that you can.
Thank you.
My name is Tobias Ema. I'm a real estate investor, and my favorite flavor is homemade vanilla. So, and I'm a little upset. Like, we're talking about this awesome book, and there's no ice cream.
Oh, we got a refrigerator. You're going to have some.
Yeah. I was going to say you should have been here yesterday, but that's a fishing thing. Go ahead.
Okay, so obviously there's a huge agenda with this book to draw people closer to Christ and to, shine some light on some different aspects of your Christian views and things like that. You're a leader in such a politically charged and agenda charged environment. You're still fresh out of Bluebell as a leader there, and pretty world renowned leader. What's going through your mind to put out a book like this with that tied to your name and even potentially Bluebell? I mean, we're in an environment where it's almost frowned upon to express your Christian views.
Right. A great question, and one I was definitely very mindful of because of the fact that, again, I know that I'm here today due to the not just the path that God led me through, but from that positional standpoint. So you do have a platform, and I think you have to be real careful that you use it in a way that doesn't necessarily, no matter what my belief is, to throw our company in a different light or a different direction. This is my story. I like to tell people this is me. If you want to know who Ricky Dixon is, part of me is Bluebell ice cream. And part of me, I hope all of me, when you see and learn and get to know me, that it's Christ in me. And so I am not ashamed by any form or facet of my Christian faith.
That's awesome.
And it is what it is from that standpoint, but also very respectful. And I think you can do that in a way. There are other companies, and I won't name which they are, but they'll take a political stand or whatever it might be. We had our challenges with some of that. At the same time, we're in the business of making not just ice cream, but making memories. And so we want to do the best we can to make the best ice cream we can consistently, that you can take it home and you remember it for its ice cream, not from a particular stand. But if you want to know who Ricky Dixon is, it's Christ in me that's led me. So therefore, I was very fortunate. They read the book before I had it published, and they said, thank you. It was good to go. So I got that green light. It was a great question. And one I was I won't say very concerned about, but I wanted to be respectful because 3,500 people come from 3,500 different walks of life. So, yeah.
And also, my birthday's this Sunday.
Get out! I love this guy. We're the same age.
He's lying like a dog now.
Ricky, thank you so much for the book. I have to acknowledge, when I got into the book, I thought it was going to be another I'm the businessman. I'm super humble that I'm so great. I thought it was going to be another one of those books, and I was very pleasantly surprised. There is a lot of passion. There is Bluebell ice cream.
Excuse me, who are you and your favorite ice cream?
I am Pablo Romera. My favorite ice cream is dulce de leche.
Dulce de leche. That is, we have not had that in a while, but that it's very good.
There's a lot of passion in the book. There is, you talk about a lot of trials, but there's also been a lot of successes, a lot of celebrations. You and I, before we came here, we were talking about the Tower of Babel and how sometimes we dishonor blessings that God gives us by using them for our glory rather than His glory. Could you speak to moments where the Holy Spirit potentially put you in check for a blessing where you were pursuing for that glory, that celebration under the sun, and sort of taking your eyes of the Christ and bringing it to Him?
Yes, absolutely. And I probably would immediately gravitate to, if I had gotten that promotion at the time without that long page and a half of correction, that I would have definitely been in that camp unknowingly, but it's fact like, hey, I came up here and I got this promotion, now look at me. And I think that reset kept that from happening. I still believe, and I think you have to enjoy your successes. But what I did love is our goal was never centered around, we want to be the number one. We want to be number one, just a number. I want to be the very best that we can possibly be where we're at. And so if we're only in 23 states, if we became number one, and we've come close, I think right now we sit number 3 nationwide. But at the same time, are we doing what we need to be doing in every market that we're at? Are we fulfilling every potential? And you can always improve on that, but you've got to be real careful on the balance of pride and success. And so I think it's wonderful to celebrate. Don't get me wrong. I think you've got to have pride in it, but at the same time, remember where that comes from and not allow it to take over, because those are your first steps. And I've seen it with a lot of other companies, that not necessarily ice cream, that became number one, but they became prideful. And the next thing you know, they start compromising. Compromising leads to an inferior product, and all of a sudden you have something totally different.
So if we, I'm interrupting you, but if we as business guys have this mid-course correction, we have a legal sheet of, yellow pad with 28 lines of corrections, how do we as men address it within ourselves? And so that mid-course correction kept you from getting the pride and the ego. It's all about me. So that's a really good question to ask him, Pablo.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Following up on the same question, my name is Teran Dames. Originally from, we call it, it's actually Eden, but it's called the Bahamas. So that's another story.
We need to talk. That sounds wonderful.
But thank you so much for your book. But following up, when you were in Oklahoma at that dinner and you were expecting to receive a blessing, but a evaluation came instead, in that moment of disappointment, there are so many people who are in that position right now where they are expecting something, but they get the opposite of what they expect. They're expecting to be promoted. They're expecting for a good marriage. They're expecting something, but the negative thing happens. What would you say to that person who has this great expectation, but now it appears as if though your answer is a loss or a failure or a negative response?
Great question. And my immediate thought is this. We pray to God. We pray whatever that prayer would be, and God is always there and faithfully is listening. Sometimes he says yes, sometimes he says no, and sometimes he says wait. What I found in those times where it's disappointing, I'm not getting the answer I want, or circumstance that I find myself in, this is not where I thought I would be. What I have learned is you have to trust. This is where faith steps in. This is where trust steps in, that he's doing something you can't see. And I think back to some of the no's that I got in my life, and thank goodness I got no's, if that makes sense. Because
especially that first girlfriend.
Yeah, absolutely. People say, have you talked to her since? No, but I sure have been talking a lot about her since I've been doing this. But yeah, no, it's a great example because, if you put your faith in the question, then you have to put faith in the answer. And so I think that therein lies, because there are times, God, I don't understand this at all. And I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm mad. And yet at the same time, as I mature into that answer, I realize, thank goodness you answered the way you did, because you have kept me from whatever that might be. And so hopefully that answers that question.
Noel?
Mr. Dixon, thank you for being here. My name is Noel Sinaga. I am an American by birth, Indonesian by blood, and now a Texan by grace, right? And when you said earlier, very interestingly, that you're in the business of making memories. And a little true story, when I first moved here from Indonesia in 2014, Citibank brought me and my family. First Indonesian couple introduces us to, we call it the Texan Wells. So there's an Indonesian Wells ice cream, and he introduced me to the Dutch chocolate ice cream, because Indonesian and the Dutch were very close with each other. Amazing taste. Thank you so much for that. But my question is actually a follow-up to my brother's question here. You talked earlier about purpose over promotion. Would you mind just giving us a story of a series of events that led you to that conclusion that Whereas where God placed you here is for purpose and not merely a promotion.
Yeah, I think that, again, I'll go back to that as an example, but it could be timing isn't right. And so the purpose is maybe bigger from a God perspective than from a human perspective. For me, in that moment, I'd already answered all the boxes. I'm going to get promoted, and we're going to grow, and these are the things that we're going to do. And yet, I wasn't even close to the timeline of what was taking place. And what I didn't mention is we went into Oklahoma. We also went into Louisiana. And then Louisiana, because of the ripple effect, took us into Mississippi and then Alabama and then Florida. So actually going east, things were picking up and going at a whole lot, I want to say more rapidly than what was taking place in the area that where I was at. But I'm sure, and I'm not trying to draw a blank on this, but at the same time, I think that it's interesting in your prayer life, especially if you journal, to put those down. And then what I try to do is look at it, God, I almost want to put this in your timing as well. This is what I'm asking for today, but I'm going to trust you with the time of this. So you want to balance the two, meaning that, God, I want patience, I want it now type of thing. But at the same time, I think that he, a lot of times, I don't want to say stalls, that's not the right word, but he allows the maturing of that period, whether it be the answer, to be able to develop you to when you get to that point, you're ready for the answer. Because there's times where I may not have been ready for the answer. So hopefully that answered your question. Good question, though.
One thing about promotion, I can't remember the address exactly. You might be able to help me out, but he says, not from the east, nor from the west, nor from the desert comes exaltation. But God is a judge. He puts one down and raises another. So that verse sets for me who's going to promote you. Mm. He's going to put you where he wants you when he wants you. Right. And not the company or the people, but God's going to put it in those people's heart to bring you into that position to be where he wants you to be. So if you get on purpose to begin with in your life, your professional life will not necessarily be like this climbing deal, but it'll be very purposeful, and God will take care of your needs in the process. Yeah. So John Stanley has a question for you.
Mr. Dixon, thanks for being here. I am Indian by birth and American by adoption, and I haven't been kicked out yet, so I'm still here. My favorite ice cream is gooey butter cake. My wife is from St. Louis, so I was exposed to that 14 years ago when I first met her, and so fell in love with gooey butter cake, and now this flavor as well. My question, first of all, I want to make a comment on your whole conversation with Stan this morning. One scoop at a time, I heard it as one faith step at a time with your book. Okay, so you have taken many faith steps, but a profound statement that you mentioned on other chapters is, unfortunately, we so often treat this grace as an entitlement, forgetting the price that was paid. A battle rages within each of us. With the gift of choice comes the responsibility of seeking God in all we do, both in the good times as well as the bad. So my question is, with success comes this entitlement easily. And how do you curb that on a daily basis?
Boy, you're nailing it, because I think that it's human with success. I call it maybe puffery, or you can't help it. You've worked hard and you've been rewarded for that. But I think it also goes back to you don't want it to flip into to where all of a sudden now I've got this, because you don't have it, whether you think you have it or not. And to balance that with the last question too is, there are times where you may get promoted and it wasn't the right thing. Okay, you want that promotion, and God says, okay. And I can tell you firsthand some individuals that we promoted, and then within a month, 6 months, a year, they would come back in the office and say, this isn't for me. I was in a great spot doing what God had planned, or this was my sweet spot, and this is not my sweet spot. And so frankly, when they named me president of the company, I wanted to make sure, God, are you sure? Because I was real comfortable. So you want to make sure that, yes, pride's not a bad thing if you handle it correctly, but at the same time, you've got to remember that where it comes from, and that the grace, the fact that you are still every much of a sinner on that side is what you were prior to, and yet saved by grace. You know, he takes the broken and he makes it, but it's through his grace that we're saved. It's through his grace that we're promoted.
Thank you.
Introductions, Dominic Sylvester. I'm an entrepreneur, and my favorite ice creams as of last weekend are the cookie two-step, and then the birthday cake. So in chapter 9, you speak to not playing church, but stripping away everything and praising God for who he is and what he's done. Can you share kind of what brought you to that point of saying, hey, I feel like I'm going through the motions here. There's something more, and, you know, kind of maybe sharing a little bit how you walked through that.
I appreciate the question, because I think you're spot on. It's when if I look at my Christian walk, it's a relationship with Christ. I've given my heart to him, and now I'm walking with him. And so it's similar to any relationship that you have. There are times that you might feel like you're going through motions, or you know, you're not engaged because of things that are pulling you away from where that relationship could be. Thankfully, we have a loving God that understands that, and he's patient. Thank goodness he's patient. But there are times where you do feel like you're playing church. You know, you dress the part, you say the right things, you show up every time the doors are open, but yet, are you growing at all? Or where are you with the relationship? There was a song back, I want to say in the 80s, Larnell Harris sang it, and it was really God saying, I miss my time with you. Those moments together. You say you're busy, but you're busy trying to please me, but yet we're not having these one-on-one conversations. And so that's when I feel that distance, I know what I need to do. And that's to strip away everything. And I love that chapter for that reason. Quit worried about the way I look, quit worried about the way I sound, and just get raw back in front of my master, and not just pray for forgiveness, but to develop that relationship back again. And there's nothing better than when you're walking with a Savior, even in those tough times. So great question.
Well, Ms. Dickerson, I didn't express my favorite flavor, so completely forgot. But mine is cookies and cream.
Yay!
Yeah, and butter pecan. So
those are great flavors.
Yes. In chapter 7, you shared in your book a great ordeal that you guys went through, and you mentioned it earlier. That must have, for something of that magnitude to happen, it must have shaken your world. Of course, I know it did. For individuals right now whose world has been shaken with cancer, or some diagnosis that they didn't expect, or something tragic has happened, how would you encourage them to stay? The term fear, it's easy for us to say, as Paul told Timothy, God has not given us the spirit of fear, right? And we can quote scriptures. We can throw scriptures at a lot of things. But practically, how would you encourage someone to stand in the midst of a situation like that?
Probably the toughest question asked so far, and probably the most important, because I think you're right. We live in definitely a broken world, and because it's broken, you have bad things. You have situations like you mentioned, cancer or the death of a family member. We had, while I was writing this book, I have a dear friend that lost a son, 31 years old, and I thought about, while I was writing, how would I respond to him, because this doesn't make sense. Because again, we live in the broken world. That's where faith and trust have to come in, and I can only say, when I am in those times, I go to the cross and I think how much God loved us so much that he endured that kind of pain, that he allowed his son to die. And so he can understand those emotions, but at the same time, I keep saying, but we're living in this broken world, and that's where faith and trust come in. And I will tell you that as much as I don't understand those, and those would be those first questions I think ask, we have to still trust that he is the sovereign God, that he loves us more than we can ever comprehend. And he's there to embrace and hold, even in those days of tough times, because we're all going to hit at some point in time. As we get older, we're going to be faced with, sicknesses and illnesses, and we talked about the other day the flooding that took place in Brenham, and had a little girl get swept away in the waters. How and why? I don't understand this, God. But at the same time, that's where the faith picks up. And for me, is I just trust. I trust. Look, I don't understand this, God, but I trust.
Encourage people to trust the Lord, I think, and it's hard to do. So Phil has our last question over there, and I'll wrap it up.
Hi, my name's Phil Carlson, and my industry is actually discipleship and evangelism of men in the business world and in the marketplace. And my favorite flavor is really the one I get to experience a couple times a year, every year, and that's going to be the homemade vanilla with the apple pie, and always pairs really well with pumpkin pie. So always look forward to that, Thanksgiving, Christmas. But my question is related to especially working with a lot of the men I work with where they have young families, and thinking about in your story, you had a father that you clearly stayed close with throughout college years, and I mean, really had an impact on you, but also the faith of your parents had a significant impact on you. It never really left you, it seems. It seems like it was continuously working on you. There are many stories of families where they are faithful families, but their kids, they end up straying. And what was the difference in your upbringing, you feel, that made it so that you actually stayed close with your parents and actually carried that deposit of faith that they were trying to put in you?
I think the thing that stood out the most, and you nailed it, because I tell people that my dad was my wisdom go-to and my mom was my prayer warrior. I can't think of a time where I would call home and mom would answer. And before she'd ever hand the phone to dad, she would always say, before I get up, how can I be praying for you? Tell me about the kids. Where? And she would literally, and then she would share that with them as well. They really did show both good times and bad times. How to have it. I go back to the word relationship. How do you actually have a relationship? How do you sit? I mean, there are times if you were to look in my window of my house and it's just me in the house, I'm talking to Jesus right there. And people would think, what's wrong with him? But it was my visual way of saying that he's not just my Savior, he's my Lord. And I think that example of what they showed, but I also think that we were unique. And I hate to say, because I do know that there's a lot of even families connected to our family, meaning extended families, that the outcome wasn't necessarily quite the same. I had an incredible template. My father's Bible, I wish I'd have brought, because there was nothing on any page that's not marked in some form or fashion. And so I like to tell people when I wake up in the morning, I get to read the word from my father and I get to hear the heart of my dad. And that's all I cared to have from him. And I'm obviously going to pass it on to my kids. But
well, Phil, it's a good question. We're going to wrap it up here shortly.
Absolutely.
So your last chapter is about choice. And the big question is for every man, woman, and child is, do you know God? Do you believe in God? Or are you going to choose God? Because we all have free will.
That's right.
So your choice, specifically and very succinctly, when did you accept the Lord as your Savior? How old were you?
May 18th, 1969. I was, what is that? I was 10, 11 years old.
11 years old. Okay, got it.
Yes.
So I'm a late bloomer. We deal with a lot of guys that are late bloomers that come into Christ with it. And a lot of men do not have a family model like you had.
Right.
Many broken homes, many things going on, lots of problems with the deal. So as we're going to give you, instead of one last scoop, one last lick at the ice cream cone. Give me 1 minute on choice. You would tell these men that are all professional men doing business, what is the best choice in business and in life? And how would you articulate that?
I get 1 minute.
That's right. You got 1 minute. That's it.
Well, I think you nailed it. I think it started in the garden. I put that in the book. I think that when we were given the freedom to choose, we think this is an incredible gift. At the same time, choice leads to good things and or bad. Consequences come with the choices that we make. But the most important choice of all is what you do with Jesus. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so you have that choice. And so when I witness, I tell people this is my path. It's the most important question, that eternity rests in that balance. And so with that, with choice, I think through his guidance, then you do get to see that path. And sometimes you make bad choices. You don't mean to, but wow, how did it end up here? Thank goodness. It's no different when you get in the car and you plug in the address in your GPS and you get on the highway and all of a sudden you think, I got a better way. If we get off here and go this direction, we'll get there faster. How often does that work? And so you hear that voice recalculating and he gets it back on. Choice is based off of that. And we're going to make not necessarily all the right choices, but at the same time, when you come down to the final choice and the eternal choice, and that is, what are you going to do with Jesus? And for me, he's my Lord and Savior. And to me, that's an eternal choice that I'm going to enjoy for eternity.
Ricky, how did you hear the voice of God? How do you practice that?
What I found is you have to be able to recognize his voice. And the way to do that is to spend time with him, whether it be in Scripture or one-on-one. And when I would get up early in the morning and go around on my morning walks, I would actually pray, God, put in me what you want me to hear to you today. Whether you tell people you're going to pray for them. Okay, but how many times do you really go back? And I remember I told this individual, God, put that on my heart. Who do I need to be praying for, even though I'm talking to God? That way we can enjoy that journey together when you have that communication.
So he was, yesterday he was going into this illustration. He was going into a board meeting, so he was doing his walk. And he's saying, God, will you answer that question? You're going into the board meeting. How did you pray in your walk, and how did you articulate that to him? And who did you pray for?
Yeah, that very thing. This is happening today. I'm not sure what to expect, but at the same time, there were times where I would just pause and even say, okay, God, I don't have an answer to this. I'm counting on you. And just take that moment to, okay, whatever's happening at this point. Because I've always wondered, was that really from God or not? But in this case, his faithfulness was always there. Always there.
So this is where he died to self, gave up control, and God, you speak through me whatever you want. So he didn't have a script laid out or a thought process with these board members and what he's doing, especially when they had the Listeria issue and other things going on in personnel. It's difficult to do. So again, I want to say to you guys, thanks for coming to the Entrust Network first podcast, and I hope this works. Share with everybody. The Entrust Network, of course, is just us, and we appreciate any gifts that come in to support the work. So that's between you and God. I'll always ask, but the answer comes from God to you. So you can always send checks and denominations to $25,000 a piece. Those work, okay? So I want to thank you so much, Ricky. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And make sure you sign everybody's book again.
All right,
It's
absolutely.
a pleasure working with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
sure
you,
do
sir.
appreciate it. Okay.